Woof woof! Hey guys, it's me Marcus, aka the Mad Dog, and thank you for tuning into this video. So this is hopefully going to be the first video of a series that I'm going to do where I'm going to help people try to get into comics or maybe broaden their horizons. So you might have been a devout Marvel Comics fan for your entire life, or maybe you've only read independent comics, and maybe now you're looking to branch out and finally break into the world of DC. But at the same time, you might be a bit put off about all the continuity that's going on, and you might not want to jump straight into Final Crisis because you don't even know what would be happening. That's perfectly fine, and we've all had to start somewhere, and I'm here today with the 15 comics I think are going to turn you into a DC fan. I know you're probably all bursting with excitement, but just before I get into the list, I do just want to have to point out that one, this is my personal opinion, and you know, it's what I think would help best for people who haven't read any DC comics before. And this isn't necessarily the greatest DC comics runs that I'm listing, it's the ones that are best for a beginner. So it's got to have a great story that's enjoyable, it's got to introduce you to a character or a group of characters, and it can't be so continuity heavy that you can't just jump into it as a new reader. So this is in no particular order, but let's just get into the list. So starting off my list, I've got Green Lantern by Geoff. If the only experience you've ever had with Green Lantern was from that movie in 2009, then you couldn't know less about the character right now. That story was genuinely awful, and this is at the beginning of the list because if you're going to give any book a chance, I think it needs to be Redemption for Hal Jordan. And there's no better run to do it than with Geoff Johns' run that took place, and it started I believe in 2005 and it ended about in 2013 if I remember correctly. But although that might sound like an intimidating start point, there is no better place that you could start for getting an introduction into the DC universe, understanding who Green Lantern is, and also having an amazing story that spans over 8 years. It has been collected in 3 omnibuses, but you can get this in smaller size trade paperbacks to see if you actually like the story. And if you don't really want the full run, it breaks down into Green Lantern Rebirth, the Sinestro Corps War, and Blackest Night. So no matter which format you get it in, you will get a good story, but you have to at least start with Green Lantern Rebirth. As well, I fully 100% believe that this is a great introduction to the DC universe because you end up seeing characters throughout it. So you will see the Justice League, you'll see other Corps members, you'll see other supervillains. Particularly if you hold out until you get into Blackest Night, you'll see so many characters throughout the DC universe cropping up in different ways. This was one of those runs that I read in the major events, so I read Rebirth as a trade paperback, and then Sinestro Corps in the 2 paperbacks that it came in, and then I read Blackest Night. And as soon as he announced those omnibuses, I knew I wanted to fill those gaps in between, so although you can just have those 3 major events, I reckon reading those 3 events alone will make you want to buy the full run so you can see everything that happens in between. Now my second choice is Batman Hush. This was actually my first DC comic that I actually properly sat down and brought. And I know that this is in the original Batman numbering, so it's in the 600 or so issues. And although at first glance it does seem that Batman Hush takes so much from the continuity of Batman that comes before it that you won't be able to just jump into it as a new reader. And maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I managed to do it, and this was a great gateway into the Batman universe. Near enough every major character is in Batman Hush, and the art's perfect. It's Jim Lee. You will probably not see any better than Jim Lee, especially if you're quite new into comics or maybe just getting into DC Comics. I think this is one of the best impressions that you can get of Batman. It tells an interesting mystery story that does also delve into Batman's past, so in a way it actually gets to educate you as you're reading the story. Now the reason why I picked this as the Batman story to go onto this list is because I think it just has that great world building to it. Sure, I could have recommended Batman Year One, I could have recommended The Killing Joke, I could have even recommended The Dark Knight Returns, which I don't think is great as an introduction to Batman, or I could have recommended something like The Long Halloween. But I think for that one-stop story that you need for Batman, it would definitely be Hush, and I'd recommend it 100%. Now my third pick is the JLA run that started with Grant Morrison. I believe this first got printed in 1999, and weirdly if you look at some of the covers you'll see stuff like Superman Blue and Superman Red, and you'll see things that happened as a larger effect of the DC universe come into this storyline. So you think this wouldn't be a great entry point into the Justice League, but I drastically disagree. Because the weirdest thing about this run is that when all those things were happening outside in the DC universe, it just sort of took it on board but carried on with the story that it was telling within JLA. And if you carry on with it, you've got some amazing runs, like you've got Rock of Ages and you've got Tower of Babel, that are the 2 stories that really stand out in my mind. There's also World War III, you can delve into Earth 2, but there's so much quality story here that it's worth just jumping in, even if you're not familiar with who all the Justice League are at this point. This also came out at that time where comics did a really good job of telling you who each character was in the first issue. There's an omnibus that's coming out and you can get paperbacks of this run, although after the Grant Morrison books it is actually difficult to get. Now fourth up on my list I've got the Flash Rebirth and the solo series that followed it. Again, it is Geoff Johns. Shall we just take a drink every time I say his name now? Because exactly what he did for Green Lantern a few years later he did end up doing for the Flash. Because because if you're a new reader to DC, it might be confusing why there's so many different Flashes and what's happened to them all. Whereas Flash Rebirth focuses entirely on Barry Allen and it just follows his story. Because this is a great gateway point, especially if you've watched the Flash TV show and you're now wanting to get into the comics, because it does have that continuity behind it, but that isn't the sole driving force of this book. As well, the solo series that followed it, that I always remember having the Brightest Day banner over the top of it, that was the first comic series that I brought in single issues from DC, and that all led up into Flashpoint. So if you're really invested in getting into the DC universe and you want to see about events and stuff like that, I think this would actually be the best point for that for you. Because although people have differing opinions on if Flashpoint was good or not, it was a DC universe spanning event. And where stuff like Crisis on Infinite Earths or 0 Hour might need you to know so much about the universe already, Flashpoint can bring you into that as a result of reading Flash Rebirth and the solo series. Fifthly, and we're double dipping on the Geoff Johns, but I've got Superman's Secret Identity, which conveniently, and to give you a little clue into my next haul, I've got the deluxe edition sitting right next to me. So subscribe and you can see it again at the end of the month. But Superman is the flagship character for DC. He's the mascot of them. As much as Batman is the more popular one, Superman is the poster boy for that comic universe. But unfortunately, there isn't very many stories that you can actually point to and say that that's a great story for Superman, and it's also a great entry point as a new reader. There are some scattered across the years, and of course I could have talked about Superman by John Byrne or All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison, but I think if you're a new reader, this is possibly the best entry for you, because this takes it back to the roots, and although it might be the story and the origin that you've heard for years and years before, it tells it you in a slightly different way. And as well, it's got Gary Frank on art, which is the reason why I got this in the deluxe edition rather than the trade paperback, although I do wish they'd do an absolute, because I love this story so much. As much as I love Jim Lee, Gary Frank might actually be my favourite Superman artist because he drew him like Christopher Reeve, which is one of the reasons why I'm recommending this to new readers, because you might just have that perfect Christopher Reeve image in your head every time that you think of Superman. Don't worry, I do as well. And this tells you a quite short but heartwarming story about Superman so that you can get introduced to the world, you can learn about some of his villains and his allies, and you can just get introduced to it through this. From there, to map it out for you, you can carry on with other Geoff Johns titles if you know that you like his writing as a result of this. Sixthly, and this was the first DC comic that I ever actually read, and it's Superman Batman by Jeph Loeb. And I'm talking in particular about the first 4 trade paperbacks, so we're talking Public Enemies, Supergirl, we've got Absolute Power, and we've got Vengeance, if I remember correctly. These are just fun stories beginning to end, so if you've recently got into the DCEU and you like that collaboration between seeing Superman and Batman in a film together and you get a kick out of that, I think this story is going to be amazing for you. You're going to have a great time. It's got great art from people like Ed McGuinness, Michael Turner, and I think Carlos Pacheco did a run in it. So it's got that amazing art, it's got great storytelling, but as well as that, again, it does help you get introduced to these two worlds. The first trade in particular will introduce you to some of the more obscure villains that are in the Batman and Superman roster, and if you don't want to jump into the deep end with a Justice League story, I think this would be a great substitute for you. As well, here you can learn which of these characters that you really like, so you can know then if you want to read more about Batman or if you want to read more about Superman. Now for my 7th recommendation that I'd give you, I've got the Injustice universe. I brought the trade paperbacks of these and I think you'll be fine with that, because firstly I think the omnibus has gone out of print, and secondly I don't think the art is that great. But regardless, as an entry point into the DC universe, this does work really well, because if you've played the Injustice video game, this is the best entry point for you to get into DC Comics, because it's got all the usual plays from the standard comics universe, but it twists everything on its head so that they're all evil. So the continuity that's come before doesn't really matter, because now you're in a different world. I get that some people might disagree with this because it's not really a true reflection of the DC universe, but if you're just trying to expand your knowledge of the characters and some of the vague storylines from the past, there's probably going to be nothing better for you than the Injustice universe. Unfortunately, the story does drop off after a while, but the first 4 years in particular are some of the best comics that have come out, especially as a result of a video game. Now, whilst I was sitting and I was looking across at my collection before I did this video, I've added 2 extra picks, the first of which is Starman by James Robertson. Although it is getting quite difficult to get, there was the 6 smaller, like standard size omnibus hardcovers, and then they did paperback versions of that. I would still 100% recommend this just because of how good it is. This is a DC comic that I'd recommend for people that don't want a character similar to what they've already seen in the movies. Starman is the reluctant superior, he's the guy who doesn't want to accept that responsibility. He's got all that heritage of the like sins of his father type storyline, and it spans an 80+ issue story that is just amazing start from finish. I haven't read this in years and I keep meaning to go back to it, but I've got so many fond memories of this, and I remember just enjoying it even though I didn't have much of a knowledge of Starman before that. It's as if they took a character that they knew not many people had that many feelings about and just made a great story. You do get some exposure to the DC universe all the way to the point of it tying into Blackest Night at the end, so it's sort of a soft entry into the DC universe and just great comic storytelling storytelling altogether, Starman is definitely getting my recommendation. And on the back of that, I'd be stupid to do this video and not recommend Gotham Central. I unfortunately am still a peasant with just the 4 standard size hardcovers, and for just £3 a month you can sponsor a mad dog to make sure he doesn't go without a Gotham Central omnibus again. But all joking aside, Gotham Central is the Batman book for people who don't realise that they want a Batman book. As well, if you just finished the Gotham TV show, please read Gotham Central because it's so much better. For starters, you've got 2 of the best comic writers at the helm of it, so you've got Ed Brubaker and you've got Greg Rucka. You've got fantastic, not over the top art from Michael Lark, and you get a Batman story that's grounded and doesn't need Batman for it to be successful. The fact that this book works as well as it is a miracle in my eyes, because to me the most interesting thing about Gotham is Batman, and it is having all these vigilantes and villains running around. So to take all of that away and to still make it interesting is a feat that I don't think many writers could do. There is an omnibus that's recently gone out of print that does collect the full series, but you can get 4 paperbacks of this to complete the run. Now for my 10th pick, I've got Batman Mad Love. Now I'm not trying to smuggle another Batman title in here. This is solely for people who want to get into Harley Quinn and more like the villain side of the universe. I could have recommended you Joker or Luther by Brian Azzarello, or I could have recommended you the Harley Quinn run by Amanda Conner. I could have also recommended you that recent Harleen book, but I think Batman Mad Love does the best version of the Harley Quinn story, because it's written by Paul Dini, who had so much to do with the animated storyline. And this effectively tells you Harley Quinn's true origins, as well as telling you a Harley Quinn and Batman story. A few years ago, this got released with a beautiful deluxe edition that I still haven't yet to buy. I've still only got the paperback at the moment from years and years ago, but whether you're coming into this as a result of watching the Batman animated series or being a Harley Quinn fan, you won't be disappointed with this book. Now next up is DC The New Frontier by Darwyn Cooke. It isn't possible to mention this book without mentioning that unfortunately the writer and artist of this, Darwyn Cooke, did pass away a few years ago. But as tragic as that is, it just adds to the prestige of this book. It's amazing storytelling. The art is second to none. Like honestly, DC The New Frontier is a book that I must have read at least 5 times and I've never got on board with it. It's in the same vein as Watchmen for me. I brought the deluxe edition and then I had to buy the Absolute. It's just a really quirky storyline as well, and it is one of the best introductions to these characters because it takes place between the Golden and the Silver Age of comics. So you meet the Flash and you meet Hal Jordan and you see Wonder Woman transitioning as a character. You see Superman grow into his own, and Batman manages to find a way to get himself into the limelight, and this is just a book that works on every level. And it's also got that great historical context that a lot of comics won't tackle with now, so you see them talk about the Cold War and about the ramifications of slavery. I don't think I can say enough to do DC The New Frontier justice, so if you want to get into this comic universe, just buy it, just trust me, you're gonna love it. Now unfortunately the next one is quite difficult to get, but you might be able to find it, and that is Power Girl by Jimmy Palmiotti and Geoff Johns. So take another drink. But Power Girl is one of those characters that hasn't had a lot of exposure into the mainstream universe. Her costume unfortunately is quite revealing, but as a character she's so fascinating and she's so amazing. She isn't just your standard Superman clone as a woman, and in this one in particular there's this like business angle to the whole thing that just really works well. There's cats in it as well, and you've got amazing art throughout, so I can't recommend this series enough. I hope they do some kind of omnibus, because she's recently also had a series crossing over with Harley Quinn, which has mainly got the same creative team, which will give you that good entryway into the DC universe as a whole. But because this is a character that isn't necessarily A-list, you're not going to have to worry about all that continuity, because admittedly there isn't a lot of people that know that continuity to begin with. So here you get a great story, you're going to get amazing art, and you're going to get introduced into a character that not many people know in the wider world. And as well, if you're a girl that's trying to get into DC Comics and you don't really resonate with the randomness of Harley Quinn, or you don't really like the stoic Wonder Woman, I think Power Girl would be the best option for you. But regardless of your gender, this is still an enjoyable run. Now for the final 5 books, I've gone entirely from the New 52, because as much crap as we gave the New 52 when it was happening, it was a great entry point for a lot of important characters. And first up on the roster, I've got Wonder Woman. So I did want to include a Wonder Woman title on this, especially if you've just watched that Wonder Woman film, and I might do a separate video where I talk entirely about how you can get into Wonder Woman quite easily. But the New 52 run that was written by Brian Azzarello is the best entry point for Wonder Woman as a whole, and you can learn more about the Amazonian mythology. It delves in really well into Greek gods, so you get an interesting story from a few angles. And there is a few different ways that you can approach this, so if you want a more gritty and grounded but still staying true to its kind of godly roots, I think the Wonder Woman New 52 route is the best option for you. You can get this in an omnibus, but it is quite pricey if you don't know that you like the story, so I'd recommend getting the first of the 6 trade paperbacks of the Brian Azzarello run. Next from the New 52 universe, I've got Justice League by Geoff Johns. so have another drink. But the Justice League is always going to be that flagship team when it comes to the DC universe. And maybe you do want a completely fresh start, so the Grant Morrison run really might not be for you. Your best option then is the one that started in the New 52, because they started the universe from scratch, and this was actually the first title that came out as a result of this. The characters are a lot younger and you see them forming the team together, so you will have that introduction into who these characters are and how they actually became a team. And this run went on for quite a few years and it had quite a few events in it, so you can experience those big universe crushing events. You can find out which characters and which villains you like within this universe, and then you can branch off from there. It's all about the discovery of it, and I think that this is a great starting point for that. And for the next pick, we've got Aquaman, and guess who it's by? Yep, Geoff Johns, so you have another drink. But prior to this run, Aquaman had quite a negative image, especially when it came to the mainstream. He was always seen as a joke character, despite the fact that there were so many great runs, especially the one by Peter David, but he didn't seem to have that go-to run that could change his image in the mainstream audience. And in particular, if you like Jason Momoa's impression of this, although the likeness isn't the same, I think you will really get a kick out of this. It's got amazing art by Ivan Reis, and it explores the depths of Atlantis, and it just tells you a great story that happens to feature Aquaman. The only disappointing thing with this run is that it did seem to be building up to something bigger than what actually happened, and we didn't actually get the conclusion of this story. So this book is great as an introduction, and hopefully you can branch off your storytelling from there. Now, although there's already 2 Batman books in this list, I'd be doing an absolute disservice to yourself by not mentioning the Batman run by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo that took place in the New 52. Oh my god, was this run fun. It doesn't matter if you've been reading DC Comics all your life or this is your first DC comic. There is nothing that isn't fun about this series. This as well will give you a great exposure to one of those long, year-spanning runs that just took place through comics, when near enough everything else stopped just to tell this story, because Batman by Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder, it doesn't actually get affected too much by what's happening in the outside DC universe. They managed to tell great stories with Joker, they actually managed to change the mantle of Batman over without it being the worst thing ever, and it's genuinely one of those runs that I think is just going to be remembered and just gets better as the years go on. So I'd recommend buying this one. I'd recommend reading the whole thing start to finish and just enjoy one of the best, if not the best, Batman run that spans for years on end. And as well, taking point from the Batman family, the next best run in the Batman universe in the New 52 was BATGIRL. It did something at the beginning that a lot of people didn't like, and I do think you have to kind of suck it up and just deal with it so that you can get through and read the rest of the story. But it's one of the runs in the New 52 that I don't hear getting a lot of buzz about. Unfortunately, it is getting an omnibus later on this year, but it might be pushed back with everything that's going on at the minute. But this would be the series that I'd recommend reading if you've just finished watching the Batwoman show. And as well, I forgot to recommend it sooner, but the Batwoman run by Greg Rucka and J.H. Williams III, that's flawless as well. Some of the most beautiful art you'll ever see. That was going to get an omnibus as well that I've had on pre-order that I just don't know what's happening with it now. But if you can still find that run, that's another great one as well. You see, you get 2 for the price of 1 with this suggestion. And that was going to be my last pick, but I've just looked across at my shelf and I've realised that there's another great one that I really enjoyed from the New 52, and that is Green Arrow. No, not the first bit, it's when Jeph Lemire comes on it around issue 17. It's so weird that this weird, because there was more buzz about this book once it was at issue 17 than when it was at issue 1. And that was because Jeph Lemire just took Green Arrow and he just took him by storm. He just put him back on the ground and he made you remember why exactly you like Green Arrow, even though the storylines are quite similar to Batman. The art in this is great as well. I can't remember off the top of my head who did it, but this is just like an extra mention that you can get the Green Arrow Deluxe Edition. It's been readily available for a while, so I definitely recommend picking that up, and you've got quite a short but complete story right there. If you're missing Green Arrow as a result of the Arrow show, I recommend getting this in particular, and then if you enjoy this, maybe step into the Mike Grell run. But those are all my picks, and I've really enjoyed doing this video. I can appreciate it's probably longer than you were expecting, but I just wanted to give you such a wide range of DC books that hopefully you'll find, and there might be 1 or 2 that you enjoy. Obviously this is just my list, so if you've got any DC books that you think are perfect for beginners, leave them in the comment section below. Or alternatively, just say what your first DC book was. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't like this video, why did you get this far? Please subscribe if you haven't already, and remember to click that bell notification. Share this video with your friend or tag someone who might be trying to get into DC Comics. As well, if you want to see more videos like this, or there's a certain comics group or there's a certain comics character or team that you want to get into and you're not sure how, just leave it in the comments section or follow me on Instagram and drop me a direct message and I'll find a way to get that video out. But check out some of my other videos and make sure that you stay safe, keep reading and keep barking all you mad dogs.